Oh, sweetie, you still work at that cafe? My sister mocked me at her engagement brunch. Some of us have actual careers. I just laughed. 3 weeks later, she walked into a board meeting, and I was sitting at the head of the table. At my younger sister's engagement brunch, she publicly mocked me for still working at a cafe. She's always been the golden child with a shiny corporate career, while I kept my successes private. What she didn't know was that I had recently become interim CEO of a fast-growing tech startup. 3 weeks after her brunch, she walked into a board meeting as a representative from a partner firm, and saw me leading the meeting from the head of the table. Let's just say, her expression said it all. Wait, you still work at that cafe? Rochelle asked, head tilted, voice full of sugary disbelief. Some of us have actual careers, sweetie. The room went quiet for a second. Just long enough for the judgment to sting. I sat there holding my mimosa, the laughter bubbling in my throat, not from amusement, but from the absurdity of it all. I just smiled. Yep, I said, and took a sip. The thing is, my sister didn't know that in addition to my little cafe job, I had recently become the interim CEO of a tech startup. Not because I had clawed my way into the position desperately, but because I'd been a quiet, strategic investor for years. I'd spent over a decade building something real, quietly. On purpose. She didn't know because she never cared to ask. But soon, she'd find out. I've always felt like a background character in my family. I'm 42 now, and for most of my life, I've been labeled the artsy one, or the one who never quite got it together. My sister Rochelle is 3 years younger and has always been the golden child. Growing up in Boston, our parents put a premium on appearances. Rochelle fit the mold perfectly: bright smile, straight-A student, valedictorian, cheerleader. By the time she was 26, she had her MBA and a shiny title in marketing at a Fortune 500 company. I, on the other hand, took a more unconventional route. After getting my degree in literature from Tufts, I drifted for a while. I worked in coffee shops, managed a small bookstore for a few years, and eventually found myself managing a little cafe in Cambridge called the Beekeeper's Cup. The cafe wasn't flashy, but it was cozy. Wood-paneled walls, stacks of old books, hand-drawn menus on chalkboards. We hosted live poetry readings and jazz nights. It felt like home. What my family didn't know was that while I poured lattes and wiped down tables, I also spent evenings teaching myself about angel investing. I'd taken a few $1,000s I'd inherited from my grandmother, a woman who always told me to do something that's mine, and put it into a tiny biotech startup in its infancy. It tripled. Then I did it again. And again. Over time, I built a small but healthy investment portfolio. Quiet wins. No Instagram stories. No LinkedIn brags. Eventually, I got involved with a content automation startup called Lyric Lab. What began as a small advisory role turned into a board position. I knew the CEO well. When he left suddenly due to a personal crisis, the board voted me in as interim CEO. None of this was on my sister's radar. Why would it be? In her mind, I was still that barista with an overdeveloped bookshelf and no direction. So when she invited me to her engagement brunch, I went. I didn't go to prove anything, I honestly hoped we could reconnect. The brunch was exactly what you'd expect from someone like Rochelle. Hosted at the Bristol Lounge at the Four Seasons, the tables were dressed in white linens and fresh tulips. The guests were a mix of polished marketing execs and investment brothers. I wore a dark blue linen dress and low heels. Simple, clean, unpretentious. Rochelle wore something that probably cost more than my first car. She greeted me with a hug, but I could feel the judgment in her gaze before she even opened her mouth. "Oh, Alina. You look comfy," she said. I let it slide. I always did. Then, during the toast, she dropped the cafe comment. That tone, the slight upward lilt at the end, the glance around the room for approval, was the same tone she used when we were kids and she'd call out my thrift store outfits at school. There were chuckles. Not cruel, just Awkward. Nobody wanted to pick sides. But I didn't care. I'd grown out of the need for approval a long time ago. I didn't retaliate. I didn't correct her. I just smiled. Because I knew what she didn't. 3 weeks later, she walked into a meeting room at Lyric Lab. I hadn't known she would be there, either. Her firm, Ambora Tech Solutions, was looking to collaborate with us on a joint platform. I'd heard of them, vaguely. Her new job had only come up in passing during brunch. She was too busy basking in compliments about her ring and talking about the wedding venue in Nantucket. That morning, I got the meeting agenda. At the bottom of the page, Rochelle Thompson, Strategic Marketing Lead, Ambora Tech. I blinked. Reread it. Well, I didn't get nervous. I didn't get excited, either. Just calmly amused. I figured she'd walk in and make eye contact with the person she assumed would be the assistant or admin support, and then she'd look up. That's exactly what happened. The meeting room at Lyric Lab is glass-walled and minimal, with a huge reclaimed wood table in the center and a digital wall display for presentations. I was already seated at the head of the table when she walked in, flanked by 2 of her team members. She stopped in the doorway. For a split second, she didn't say anything. Her face changed, first confusion, then disbelief. I gave a polite smile and gestured to a seat across from me. Rochelle. Welcome. She sat down slowly, trying to recover her composure. Her colleagues didn't seem to notice, or maybe they were too polite to comment. I led the meeting. Walked through our growth metrics. Explained the technical collaboration opportunities. My CTO and I fielded questions, drew lines on the whiteboard. Rochelle tried to chime in occasionally, but she was off. I could feel her staring at me. Processing. Still trying to compute how the cafe sister was running the show. She didn't say anything to me after the meeting. But her eyes said enough. Later that afternoon, I got an email from her. Short. Tentative. Hey. Didn't know you were CEO. Can we talk sometime? I didn't reply right away. I needed time to decide whether I wanted to reopen that door, or just let her live with the version of me she created. I didn't respond to Rochelle's email right away. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even particularly surprised by the message. Just tired. Tired in that quiet, bone-deep way that happens after a lifetime of being underestimated by the people who should have known you best. It wasn't just brunch, after all. That comment was just the cherry on top of decades of subtle digs, backhanded compliments, and family dinners where I was asked if I had considered finally going back to school or doing something more stable. They always said it kindly, gently, in the way someone might suggest you put a blanket over a stain in the rug. I was never the disaster. But I also was never the success story. To them, I was the filler. But to myself, and to the quiet, powerful corner of the world I'd built, I was a lot more than that. 2 days after the board meeting, Rochelle called. I didn't answer. Let it go to voicemail. Hey, Alina. I know it's probably weird, but I was wondering if you wanted to get coffee sometime. Or lunch? Just to catch up. Let me know. There was a pause before she hung up, like she was waiting for herself to say something else. But she didn't. I still didn't call her back. Instead, I buried myself in work. Lyric Lab was in the middle of finalizing the beta launch of our newest tool, and I was juggling investor updates, product tests, and onboarding new hires. I still made time to stop by the Beekeeper's Cup a few times a week. It was more than nostalgia, it grounded me. That cafe had carried me through a lot: grief after my grandmother passed, uncertainty in my early 30s, and even the first quiet joy of that early investing win. Sometimes I'd catch myself wondering how different things would have been if I'd been more open about what I was building. If I'd told my parents when I made my first 6 figures from a stock sale. If I'd shared with Rochelle when Lyric Lab closed Series B funding. But then I'd remind myself, they never asked. It's not like I deliberately kept secrets. I just didn't explain myself to people who never showed interest in understanding. A week passed. Then two. And then, out of nowhere, my mother called. I stared at the caller ID for a long moment before answering. "Hi, Mom." "Well," she said, skipping pleasantries, "is there something you want to tell me?" I blinked. "About what?" "About why your sister found out you're some tech executive at a meeting instead of you." "Ah. So she knew now." I sighed, walked over to the window of my apartment, and looked out over the city. It was raining softly, Boston gray and slow. "I didn't think it mattered," I said simply. "Well, of course it matters, Alina. We didn't even know. Your father and I had no idea you were doing all this. Why didn't you ever say anything?" There was a long pause on my end. Because there were 100 answers, and also none that would satisfy them. "You never asked," I said at last. "You just assumed." "That's not fair." I said nothing. She tried again. "We're proud of you. We just wish we'd known." But I wasn't looking for their pride. I hadn't been for a very long time. "It's okay," I said finally. "It's not your fault. I stopped trying to prove things a long time ago." We ended the call politely, with some awkward catch-up about cousins and neighbors. But when I hung up, my chest felt tight, not angry, just heavy. I didn't want validation from them. But it was strange how its absence still created a shape. That evening, Rochelle sent another message. This one was longer. "I don't know how to say this without sounding defensive. But I'm sorry. I was rude at the brunch. I've been rude for years, if I'm honest. I had no idea what you were doing with your life, and I made assumptions. Not because I meant to hurt you. Just because it was easier to look down than to ask. You didn't deserve that. If you're open to it, I really would like to talk. Just us, without the performance. I'm not reaching out to save face. I'm reaching out because I think I've been a crap sister, and I want to do better. If you'll let me." I read it twice. The first time with skepticism. The second time with something else. Not quite hope. But something close. I didn't reply immediately. I wasn't sure I was ready. Because her apology, though it seemed sincere, didn't undo years of being belittled. And I wasn't the same woman she grew up mocking. I'd built something without their applause. I'd endured without their guidance. And I wasn't sure if I wanted to open that old door, because I liked the world I'd made behind the one I built myself. But for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel invisible. And that mattered. I left Rochelle's message unread for a few days, not to punish her, not out of spite. I just needed space to feel everything it brought up. Regret. Sadness. A bit of vindication. But mostly exhaustion. People don't always realize that being underestimated your whole life is its own kind of weight. Not a dramatic one, not like heartbreak or betrayal. More like a constant low hum. Background noise. Every family dinner, every holiday gathering where the conversation was steered toward Rochelle's latest promotion, her new condo, her vacation photos with caption-worthy views of Santorini. While I was asked things like, "Still working at that little place? Are you getting benefits at least?" That was the tone. Not malicious, just gently patronizing. And constant. So when Rochelle finally extended what seemed like a genuine olive branch, it stirred something unexpected in me. Because for all the tension between us, I had once wanted to be close with her. I had wanted a real sister. I was sitting in my living room one night, curled up with a mug of chamomile and an old dog-eared copy of The Secret History, when I saw her message again. Still marked unread. Still quietly waiting for a reply. I clicked it open, reread it for maybe the 5th time, and finally typed back. "Let's meet at the Beekeeper's Cup. Tuesday 10 a.m. Before it gets busy." I hit send. No emoji. No punctuation flourish. Just a quiet offer. On my turf. Where I felt rooted. Tuesday came gray and overcast, but the cafe was warm and glowing when I arrived. The baristas, many of whom I had hired years ago, greeted me like family. I ordered my usual, oat milk cappuccino, no syrup. The corner booth by the window was open, so I slid into it and waited. Rochelle arrived 10 minutes late, her eyes scanning the cafe like she wasn't sure if it was okay to be there. She wore a trench coat and sleek black boots, a subtle departure from her usual corporate chic armor. She looked nervous. She saw me, waved cautiously, and made her way over. "Hey," she said, sliding into the booth across from me. "Hey." She glanced around. "It's cute here. Cozy." I nodded. It's been my second home for a long time. A silence settled between us, not quite tense, more tentative. Like we were both trying to remember how to speak to each other without pretense. "I'm glad you agreed to meet," she said. I gave a small smile. I figured it was time. Another pause. Then she sighed. "Alina, I've spent a lot of time thinking since that meeting. And I feel like I've been a complete aholi for most of our adult lives." I didn't say anything. Just let her talk. "I think I assumed you were struggling because it made me feel better about myself. I've always been so wrapped up in this idea of success, titles, money, status. But when I saw you in that boardroom, leading the whole thing, I realized how small my perspective has been." She swallowed. Her eyes flicked to mine, then away. "I'm sorry. Not just for brunch. For all of it. For making you feel like you weren't enough." That hit something in me I didn't expect. Because even though I had built a life that was full and meaningful and mine, hearing her acknowledge that truth, it felt exhaling after holding my breath for 20 years. "I didn't need an apology," I said quietly, "but I appreciate it." Rochelle nodded. "I know." We sat there, sipping our drinks, watching people come and go through the fogged-up windows. The city moved around us, indifferent to our quiet, awkward reconciliation. "I never asked what you actually do," she said after a while. "Like, what the job is." I smiled, and for the first time in forever, I told her. Not the surface-level stuff. Not the curated version. I told her how I'd started investing, how I learned from trial and error, how I got involved with Lyric Lab and what we were trying to build. I watched her eyes shift, less surprise, more something like admiration, though I wasn't looking for it. "I can't believe you did all that," she said. "And never told anyone." I didn't need to tell anyone. I just needed to do it. She leaned back in her seat, processing. "Do Mom and Dad know?" "They know now." "God," she muttered. "They must be spinning." I chuckled. "They're confused. Maybe a little embarrassed." She looked down at her cup. "I don't blame them. I used to," I admitted. "But I don't anymore. They only ever saw what they wanted to see. I let it hurt me for a long time. Until I realized their approval wasn't necessary." Her voice was quieter now. "And mine?" I looked at her for a long moment. "I wanted it, once. Now? I don't need it. But I wouldn't mind having a sister I can talk to. As equals." She looked up, and for the first time in years, she didn't look guarded. She just looked human. Tired. A little raw. "I'd like that too," she said. "But I know it'll take time." We sat in silence again, but this time it felt easier. Softer. I wasn't ready to jump back into being siblings the way we might have been if we'd had a better foundation. But I could start here. One coffee. One honest conversation. And if nothing else, I had reclaimed something in that moment, not just dignity, but clarity. Rochelle had finally seen me. Not just the version she'd built in her head. The real me. And even if the rest of the world never knew how much I'd accomplished in quiet corners and under radar blips, I was okay with that. Because the life I'd built? It was mine. Fully. Authentically. And that was enough. A few weeks passed after that meeting at the Beekeeper's Cup. Rochelle and I exchanged a few texts, nothing too deep, just check-ins, occasional links to articles, the odd meme that reminded her of our childhood. It was tentative, but not strained. Like something was slowly rebuilding itself on more honest ground. But I hadn't forgotten the boardroom. Nor had I forgotten her face when she saw me sitting at the head of the table. That look was seared into my memory, not because it was satisfying to watch her squirm, but because for the first time I wasn't the one feeling small. She had finally been placed in my shadow, if only briefly. And honestly, that was enough revenge for me. But life had a bit more poetic symmetry in store. Lyric Lab has grown fast over the last 2 years. And with that growth came acquisition offers, serious ones. One in particular came from a media conglomerate with international reach, and I spent weeks negotiating the terms. As interim CEO, I had the authority to finalize the preliminary agreement. Emboratech, Rochelle's firm, had been pushing to become our marketing partner for the launch of our new AI product suite. She was now leading the entire East Coast strategic division, which meant she was at the table again, this time, pitching us, alongside 2 of their senior executives. I had already decided, months earlier, that Rochelle wouldn't get preferential treatment. But that didn't mean I would ignore what I knew either. The day of the pitch, Rochelle arrived with a sleek PowerPoint deck, a well-rehearsed pitch, and a team ready to impress. I could tell she'd put in serious work, and I gave her credit for that. She looked determined to prove herself, not just to the board, but to me. She gave her presentation to a packed room. She was sharp, focused, and persuasive. I nodded along at parts. Jotted down a few questions. Let her finish completely. Then, once she sat down, I stood. I appreciate the thoroughness, I said, addressing the room. Emboratech has made a solid case for marketing support on our Q3 launch. But after reviewing all 3 proposals thoroughly, our board has decided to go in another direction. The room went still for a beat. Her face didn't drop, but her eyes flicked. A split second of reaction. We'll be partnering with Garnet Strategies, I continued, a smaller firm out of Chicago. They came with a leaner team, but they had a more nuanced understanding of our audience and a track record with similar tech launches. We feel it's the best cultural fit for us. Polite. Professional. Completely factual. But also entirely within my control. Rochelle nodded, composed. Thank you for the consideration, she said smoothly, like a good exec. But I could see her jaw tense ever so slightly. After the meeting, as the others filed out, she lingered. Was it because of me? She asked quietly. No, I said. Not entirely. She nodded, looked down at her tablet, then back up. But maybe a little? I gave a small smile. It was a business decision. You just happened to be part of it. She didn't push it. She just gave a small, rueful laugh. Touché. I don't believe in punishment, I said. But I do believe in remembering who underestimated me. She took that in. Fair enough. We stood there in silence, just 2 women in nice shoes who had finally grown into who they really were, flaws, pride, and all. Before she turned to leave, she looked back at me. You're good at this. I know. Better than me. Not a competition, I said. But thank you. She left, and that was that. Not dramatic. Not cruel. Just full circle. Since then, I've stepped down from the interim CEO role. We brought in a seasoned executive to take the reins, and I returned to the board where I belong, quietly powerful, exactly where I like to be. I've since joined 2 more boards, both startups founded by women, and I've started mentoring a handful of young women in tech and media spaces. I still visit the Beekeeper's Cup twice a week. It's where I think best. I sit in the same corner booth, write in my notebook, and sip my coffee while watching the neighborhood move through the seasons. Rochelle and I? We're okay. Not best friends. But something resembling respect. She no longer talks down to me. She no longer makes jabs or patronizing remarks. She knows now. And as for my parents? They've started telling their friends about their daughter in tech. It's amusing. I don't correct them when they gloss over the years they spent dismissing my choices. That's not my burden to carry anymore. Because here's what I've learned: revenge doesn't have to be loud. It doesn't have to be cruel. Sometimes, the sweetest revenge is success earned in silence, unbothered, unflaunted, and the moment someone who dismissed you realizes too late that they were looking down on someone who was already far above them. And the most satisfying part? I didn't have to raise my voice. I just had to stay at the table.